Imagine that you're upset about a vacant lot where people are dumping trash. So how might you get people to clean up that trashed out lot? Well, your problem is not that different from one faced by the person who invented the term social capital back in 1916. He was the superintendent of a rural school district in the state of West Virginia in the US, where the schools were bad, the roads were bad, and nobody seemed to care. In short, he had a problem with people not caring about a public good, that is, schools and roads in a rural community. The superintendent, whose name was Lyda Hanifan, realized that if he used a top-down approach, that is, if he ordered people to get out and get involved in improving their schools and roads, they would probably simply ignore him. So instead, what he did was he worked with the teachers to organize a series of social events, picnics, sport competitions, and storytelling evenings. And as the families came to these events, they started to form connections with each other and to trust each other. And once they'd formed connections and trust, they ended up raising money for school libraries and advocating for better roads. So Hanifan coined the term social capital to describe the connections and trust which can become the foundation for collective action to improve public goods, like school libraries and roads. So what does social capital have to do with environmental education? Well, I'm going to give you a hint. Environmental education is concerned with people conserving common property resources, like open space in cities or even the air we breathe. In many cases, these resources can be considered public goods, not so different from schools and roads. But before we go deeper into social capital and environmental education, let's explore how scholars think about social capital 100 years after Hanifan first coined the term. Today's scholars, such as Harvard University's Robert Putnam, think of social capital as a collective asset, comprised of social connections, social trust, norms and values, and the behaviors that arise from them. And social capital influences the quality of our public life. So, for example, research has shown that higher levels of social capital result in lower levels of adolescent pregnancy, school failure, and child abuse, as well as higher levels of overall happiness and health. So one way to think about this is that social capital contributes to community well-being. But Robert Putnam's work on social capital goes beyond social connections and trust to encompass volunteering and other forms of participation in civic life, like joining a book club or even joining group recreational activities like hiking. Now, Putnam claims that as people have migrated to cities, engagement in these forms of civic life have declined. But other scholars have asked, is it really true that we're less engaged in civic life, or have traditional forms of volunteering been replaced by new forms, such as water quality monitoring, community gardening, or mangrove restoration, which are often part of environmental education programs? Whereas Putnam is focused on the role of social capital in strengthening communities, Nobel laureate Elinor Ostrom explored social capital's role in overcoming social dilemmas, like managing our natural resources for the collective good. Ostrom's work on the conditions under which people are likely to manage resources for the collective good provides an alternative to Garrett Hardin's well-known tragedy of the commons, which assumes that unless a government imposes outside controls on the way people use a common resource, like, for example, irrigation water, grazing land, or fish, individuals will always act in their own best self-interest. So in short, each individual will try to use more land, more water, or catch more fish because it's best for him and his family. But this inevitably leads to resources being exhausted and to environmental degradation. But Ostrom challenged the idea that human societies always exploit resources until they are exhausted. Instead, she pointed out that when certain conditions are present, including high levels of social capital, we are likely to manage natural resources for the collective good. So here's the million-dollar question. How might environmental education programs help create the social capital That is, the social connections, the trust, and the shared norms or values that are critical to creating healthy communities and avoiding the tragedy of the commons. Environmental education often involves youth and adults working alongside each other in civic activities like community gardening, shoreline or park cleanups, and advocating for environmental friendly policies. These activities may build social connections, trust, and even common values or norms. And through other environmental education programs, for example, outdoor education programs that include rock climbing or scaling high peaks, participants depend on each other and they build trust. In short, environmental education that engages participants in working together toward a common goal, in volunteering and civic action, creates opportunities to build social capital. And social capital in turn can contribute to environmental education goals of community well-being and environmental quality.